A lamp to my feet is your word, a light to my path. Alleluia, alleluia, alleluia. The Lord be with you. A reading from the Holy Gospel according to Matthew. Jesus said to his disciples, "You have heard that it was said, an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth. But I say to you, offer no resistance to one who is evil. When someone strikes you on your right cheek, turn the other one to him as well. If anyone wants to go to law with you over your tunic, hand him your cloak as well. Should anyone press you into service for 1 mile, go with him for 2 miles. Give to the one who asks of you, and do not turn your back on one who wants to borrow." The Gospel of the Lord. So this is one of the perplexing gospel passages about turning the other cheek and offering no resistance to one who is evil. This is one of the many different passages, which is why many modern atheists, right, claim that Christianity is not simply untrue, but that it is actually detrimental to humankind. This is the famous argument of Friedrich Nietzsche and of Karl Marx, of Sigmund Freud, and many of their disciples. This is one of the common ideas in modern Christianity, and we see it in many different ways, some that are more extreme. Right? Like Christopher Hitchens, he used to say that Christianity was child abuse, right? Teaching children not only things that are false, but things that he believed were detrimental to human flourishing. We see this, so that's an extreme version of it, but we also see it in other soft ways. One of the ways that psychology, right, has begun to take over our culture is it basically makes psychology the greatest good, even sometimes telling people to do things that are immoral. Right? We see this very much taking place in our culture. And then even many Christians and many Catholics unknowingly hold these ideas. Many Christians and many Catholics, they see all of the rules of the church and of the Bible, and they believe that it's in some way detrimental to their flourishing. Whether or not they voice that out loud, I think it is a very common idea. Many modern Christians think that we just should try to be good people and should believe in God, but we don't need to worry about so many of the rules. Right? We don't want to be Pharisaical, right, as many people think. Right? So a lot of that comes from passages like this. If someone hits you on your cheek, turn to him the other one as well. Jesus in this gospel passage was not so much speaking literally, right, that we should allow people to persecute us. Right? We know this because when he himself was on trial, right, when he was slapped by the high priest's servant, right, he did not turn his other cheek. Right? He responded in defense. Right? What Jesus is getting at here in this Sermon on the Mount is he is saying that there will always be physical injustices and physical persecutions in this world. We live in a fallen world. The question is whether or not it will make you an unjust person. The question is whether or not it will corrupt you in your soul and in your virtue. Many people, when they experience injustice or persecution, they become embittered and resentful, and they seek vengeance. That is not the way of Christ. Now, an example of this is, I've probably told you guys this story before, but something that always stood out to me about not letting the world take your joy and your peace and becoming a vengeful or resentful person. One of my friends back in Noblesville, she was telling me this story about, so she was the kind of person who, she didn't like dream killers. She felt like a lot of people in the world are just, they're always grumpy and dream killers. Like you have these ideas to improve things and people just naysay, right, and make excuses for how they won't happen. And so she kind of made a habit of just overcoming those obstacles. And one of my favorite stories she told was she went to the post office one morning and she had a bunch of packages to send in the mail, and she needed to write down the address on those pieces of paper. So she waited in line, and when she got up to the counter, right, she asked if she could borrow a pen. And the person said, we don't have any pens to loan out. And she looked, and there was a pen right there on the counter. And she said, what are you talking about? Why can't I just borrow your pen? She said, well, we've learned that when we let people borrow pens, they end up walking away, right? And then we're left with nothing to write with. She was like, I promise you I'm not going to take your pen. And this guy just dug his heels in, right? Refusing to give her this pen to use. And so my friend, Susan, she ended up leaving, and she went over to the local grocery store, and she bought a bag of 100 pens. And she returned to the post office, and she dumped the entire bag on the counter, right? Now you have pens that you can loan to people, right? And I've always just loved that story. It's simple, right? But it is significant, right? We are to be magnanimous. We are to be men and women of peace and joy. And we shouldn't let the grumpy or resentful or cynical people around us, right, keep us from living that way. And that's why I love that story that she shared, right? She refused to let somebody discourage her and make her upset and bitter, right? She one-upped him, right? And I think that's the way that many of us should be when it comes to our spiritual lives, right? When we face the injustices of this world, right? To not become an embittered or cynical person, but find ways to still bring goodness and joy and peace to the world.